In this video, I'm going to be talking about the basics of what I call the RSDS model, where resistance yields separation, yields desire, yields suffering. And this model, when broken down, it shows you the simplicity of just how suffering is created in your life and just what you can do to eliminate it. It also points out all of the ineffective strategies very quickly and easily, so you can just catch on to really simply what's going to work and what's not going to work, regardless of what the pop psychology tells you, or your psychiatrist tells you, or your life coach tells you, or whatever guru you're listening to, personal development, self-actualization, anything like that. You'll just be able to cut right through the garbage and judge for yourself what's going to work and what's not going to work at a very, very basic level. And it's going to be broken down so simply, you're going to be able to cut right through the BS. So I'll start to explain it. It all boils down to resistance. So what I've discovered is that there is a direct link with suffering and resistance. And it is by the very structure of how we make up our psyche, how we make up our ego, how we make up ourselves to be these separate individuals, that suffering is a natural result of our unconsciousness around this. And it's a very, very simple thing to recognize. Once we begin to recognize it, then we can allow that freshly generated awareness to dissolve that resistance and thereby increase our ability to perform and free us of the suffering that was unnecessary, that was self-created all along. Sound like a good deal? All right, so stay with me. The basic premise is that if we are just dealing with our resistance, then we are at the visceral level of the energetic quality of whatever it is we're feeling in our bodies in that moment. Now, a lot of times we think that suffering is based on the circumstances of our life. It's caused, for instance, we think, because we don't have money, or we're not, feeling good enough about ourselves, or we don't have the right, girlfriend or boyfriend or significant other, the right relationship. We're failing in our business, or we're not where we'd like to be in our career. So we constantly try to fix these things, switch them around, change them up. Or this person didn't approve of me. I never got the love that I needed from my father. Any of that stuff, whatever it is, it all boils down to a story that we've created around an identity. And it is that exact identification with that story that causes the suffering. Now, here's what I mean. Suffering, you see, is not just physical pain. It's not just mental pain. It's not just emotional pain. But suffering is actually maintained by a story. It has to be maintained by a story. Otherwise, we just have the raw sensory data. For instance, I talked about this in one of my other videos about how resistance is futile. And about how, if someone's poking you with something, that is a very visceral thing. You can feel that. You don't like it. You don't want it, right? You may resist it, but there's no story of suffering around it. It's just unwanted. It's just unpleasant, for instance. It's causing pain. And pain is sensory data. It's just input going into the system, letting us know, hey, we're either on track or no, move towards this or move away from that. It's a very, very simple biological function that every living cell has managed to figure out how to do. Every single, from the tiniest bacteria, they all understand how to move away from pain and suffering, or rather move away from things that are causing us harm or potentially dangerous, and move towards things which are nutritious and viable for us. So, and that's just a basic way that life maintains itself. But see, when we create a story of suffering around the pain or around the discomfort, now we begin to be trapped. So all of a sudden, now I'm not dealing with just the pain. I'm not just dealing with, let's just use an example. Let's say, I was in an accident. I lost my leg and I've got this terrible pain now, right? Well, it's not just the pain that I deal with every day. It's also the loss of my leg, what that means to me as a person, how that's ruining my dreams now. I'm not going to be able to be that star quarterback that I wanted to be. There's no way that, I'm going to be able to ride horses ever again. That's the anguish and pain of all the things that I'm losing from my past, everything that I have to give up, and also all the sacrifices that I'm now going to have to make about the future that I hoped that I was going to have. But now, So if that's my story and I keep telling myself that, I'm going to become a victim. I'm going to start feeling victimized by life. It's going to actually start to shrink my power. And in order to really muster any power in the world, I may have to get bitter. I may just have to start thinking, well, this is how life treats you, that I'm just going to do for me. I'm not going to worry about anyone else. I'm just going to be cold-hearted, just like life cold-heartedly took my leg. This is the story of suffering that is being maintained, and it causes this person severe anguish far beyond the physical pain. This mental pain, this emotional pain that keeps being regurgitated over and over again by this story that he keeps telling himself is the real culprit. So if we could see through the connection between the physical sensations, for instance, or even the emotions, and also the story we've been telling us, we can see that there's a connection there that's felt, that we can sense. We can sense, oh, every time I am running this program in my head, I feel these feelings, and then the feelings intensify, the story intensifies. It's just a vicious positive feedback loop that gets worse and worse, causing me more and more stress, more and more tension. I become more and more angry, in this case, bitter, resentful of life, resentful of others, the cards I've been dealt. And you can see how all of this is doing. All of this is serving to shrink my awareness, to shrink my sense of possibility and opportunity, to shrink my heart from feeling like life is full of openness, love, possibility, wonder, magic, mystery. I'm shrinking that consciousness down into a very narrow perspective. And that's going to be the perspective that I start to live through now. And that story of suffering is going to keep winding itself over and over and over again. And I'm going to re-experience all of that tragedy, all of that anger, all of that bitterness, all of that vengefulness, all that wanting to get even, however it manifests. It's going to keep playing itself over and over again, and it becomes so ingrained in my identity that it becomes nearly impossible to shake it. I mean, it takes nearly an act of God to snap me out of this self-created hell, to recognize that I've been doing it to myself. So, first thing to do is start to see that anytime we're suffering, there's a story that's linked to it. There has to be a story to maintain the suffering. If there is no story, all we're going to be dealing with is physical sensations, emotional sensations, basically sensory data. This is something that we can deal with. We may not like it. It may not be the best thing in the world, but if you know it's not going to last forever, it's going to pass, and you also don't keep telling yourself that you're a victim because of it, all you do is you slowly but surely let go of your resistance towards those feelings, and they begin to dissolve. Their intensity begins to lessen, and homeostasis returns to the system, and a sense of peace and calm and quiet alertness that has an intensity to it and a power to it returns to the system. And this is the intelligent, awake awareness that wants to run the show, but that has been being limited by this egoic identity, this mind-created self, with our story of suffering, with our whole history, our past, all of our wants, our desires. All of that stuff gets in the way of our clear seeing. And, as it was said in Buddhism, that enlightenment really just means seeing things as they are. Seeing things as they are. So seeing things without that story of suffering, seeing things for just the visceral reality of them. And the story goes very deep, because the thing is, we take ourselves to be this character that keeps running in our head. And as long as we do take ourselves to be that character, there's very little space. There's very, very little space in our awareness that can allow an opening to occur so that we can see through that identity, to see that we actually are not that person, but we're something much greater, much, much greater. This has to be discovered for oneself, but I can start to allude you to it. You can start to see how, when you've been in that really mind-identified state of suffering, how narrow your consciousness seems, how narrow your focus becomes, how it seems like, you're almost trapped by the situation. You're scrambling to find an escape from the pain. And that's what we do. We distract ourselves. We avoid ourselves. We blame. We use all these defense mechanisms to avoid the feeling. But if we can just see through that story and sever that relationship, even momentarily, sever that connection between the story of suffering and the feelings in the body, we are well on our way to freeing ourselves. And certainly we're going to expand our capability and our capacity instantly. As I already talked about in a previous video on resistance, there's a direct correlation between resistance and capacity. And anytime we let go of resistance, we automatically increase our capacity. You see, we have a certain amount of energy that's coming into our system, that's coming into our consciousness, that's available for the system to use, or that's being created in the body. And then we have our capacity is if we are able to fully use all of that energy in the most efficient way, that would be our total capacity. But we limit that capacity with our resistance constantly. And we limit it in very many ways. We limit it, like I said, in the ways we shrink our consciousness. We're actually limiting our ability to even see potential potential solutions to issues, problems that face us, challenges that arise. I don't know if you've ever tried to create anything, if you've ever tried to undertake a creative endeavor or a business venture or any kind of, goal that you had, something you really wanted to accomplish. It was, something that was you were passionate about. If you take a look back, whether you were successful or not, for sure you encountered obstacles along the way, along your journey. You had to have. It's a fact of life. Anytime we try to create something or do anything that's working towards a goal of some kind, we're going to we're going to come up against challenges and obstacles. So our habit has been normally to resist those things when they come up. This comes up, we don't like it, damn it, so I'm gonna bullet my way over it, force myself, or we get angry and frustrated, and we give up for a while. We put the goal down. We maybe pick it up back later, but half-heartedly. Maybe we don't have the same zeal because it's just so much. We get overwhelmed by all this stuff, but it's really our own resistance to the challenges that create that overwhelm. See, there's no overwhelm in the challenge itself. There's no intrinsic overwhelm in the challenge. The challenge comes up and we're like, fuck, I wanted to do this now. I didn't want to have to wait. I didn't want to have to, circumnavigate. I didn't want to have to order this extra part. I didn't want to have to get these people involved and get their go ahead. I didn't want to have to do all that. I just wanted to move forward and do my thing and complete the project, make some progress, But naturally, things are going to happen. So how we deal with those situations is going to determine how much capacity we have and the outcome that we have. And if we're trying to bull our way over everything and just be aggressor, sure, we might have some successes along the way, but we're probably going to make a whole lot of enemies along the way also. We'll probably actually, do some damage where we could have just actually engendered friendship and camaraderie and community around our project. So so whether we're encountering resistance in other people, in situations in the world, mainly it's all about our internal reaction and response to it. If we can be open and let go of resistance, we are going to have access to the greatest possible outcome, because our consciousness is as wide open as can be, because our capacity is as wide open as can be, because the resistance has been dissolved or reduced to a good enough extent. So now that we have greater capacity, we are able to see greater possible outcomes. We can see, opportunities where before we saw obstacles. We can see how to turn things around in ways that we didn't before, because our minds are open, because we're not so locked into this competitive, aggressive, kind of forcing our way to get what we want. And that is actually resistance. That's trying to use resistance to get what we want. Now, it does work for a very, very bullish person in the short term. And, it works sometimes in business. We see this in business people. A lot of times, not all of them, certainly not all of them, Not nearly all of them, not even most of them, but some of them, some very successful people have gotten that way through their bullishness and their aggressiveness and their lack of concern for the little guy, their willingness to step on people to get ahead. Yeah, we've all seen that. But does that mean that those are the qualities that lead to success? Is that what we should try to cultivate for ourselves? Absolutely not. That is the way of the old and the way of the new. The way of the engenders the most power. We already know this is through communal effort, is through joint effort, is through people working together for the good of a whole. You can create much, much better when we work together. We can do more. But even in our own selves, we can do more with what we have in our own selves. We can do more with our innate potential when our capacity has reached its full. Its full limit. So the way to do that is through dissolving and releasing resistance. So some of the ways in which we encounter that resistance are in, like I said before, the sense of victimization that we may get, any sense of anything that causes fear to arise. These will create resistance in us. Think about next time you have to do something that you don't want to do. Think about that feeling that comes up. Or you're doing something you don't know if you can do it. You're scared. They have a different quality, but at their root is resistance. You don't like this idea. It scares you or it makes you angry. You don't like the feelings that it brings up. It's uncomfortable, so you resist. And that is the thing. That's the thing. This resistance happens so fast because it's really built into our identity. And that's where this RSDS model comes from that I'm talking about. So what it basically refers to is how resistance is what is necessary to build an identity. It's built on separation. Our ego is all based upon separation. And in order to feel separate, in order to create a separate identity, we must have resistance. We must have resistance on some level, resistance to being the whole. I'm not the whole, I'm not everything, I'm me, I'm separate. Do you see what I'm getting at here? How resistance is the cause of that feeling of separation? This isn't a bad thing, this is just how human beings create our characters. But the problem is when we've become so lost in the character that we've forgotten our true nature. And our true nature is that which exists that's beyond all resistance, that is actually the background that allows the existence of that resistance in the first place. It's the conscious awareness that we are that's non-dependent on external situations or people or dividing lines or separation of any kind. It is actually the source of all. That's our true nature. I don't want to get too far into that right now because that's something for another video. But just to go back to it, you can start to see how you have a character, you have a person you believe yourself to be. You're not Joe, you're not Bob, you're Sally, or you're whoever your name is. So I'm not Jim, I'm Koharalan. I'm not you, I'm me. And if you call my name, I know to raise my hand. That's me, right? And it's not, like I said, that's not a bad thing. But when I've taken myself to be the character so much that I now protect this character with my life, and not that there's anything wrong with protecting your body. Of course you would want to do that. But what I mean is you defend this false identity that we have about who we are actually not. We defend this character with our lives, and it's not actually who we are. When we discover who we actually are, we realize that all that resistance that we had to life, to other people, to things, to this and that, all that resistance was just limiting us. It was just actually holding us back. So nonetheless, the resistance, as you can see, has yielded this separation. This separation is where we built our character on. Now, if I'm separate, here's another thing that naturally happens. If I'm separate, I'm not the whole. And if I'm not the whole, that means there are things that are other than me. This whole sense of otherness is the flip side, and that takes resistance. There's a pushback. You're an other. That's an other. It's either a push or a pull in the other direction. If we want something, if we have a desire for something, then that's a pull towards that thing. But if we look carefully, if we really feel into the subtle nature that's at the root of that desire, believe it or not, it's resistance. And I say believe it or not because you have to check this out for yourself. You can't just take my word for it. And it takes a lot of time and practice. But the result is that you could be free of this pattern of resistance in your life, and you could experience much, much greater capacity and ability to accomplish what it is that you want to do, have, and become, and realize about yourself. And most of all, you can realize ultimately your true nature, because when we totally let go of all resistance, there's nothing left but that. There's no one left to be separate from it. I know that may be a little esoteric for this video, but that's something to keep in mind. Resistance goes up and down all the way. It's responsible for the most base behaviors of mankind, and the ultimate freedom from that resistance carries with it a depth of recognition of oneself that is unattainable through any other method. So, now that we've seen how resistance creates separation, a separate ego, and we've started to see how that separate sense of self must lead to the creation of desires of all kinds. You know, some are very natural, and there's not anything wrong with those. In fact, there's not anything wrong with any of this. The only thing wrong is when we are limited in ways with which we could be free. We're limited in ways that we don't need to be because of our lack of awareness or our lack of consciousness about how this thing functions. So starting to see this and break it down is going to help us to greatly increase, once again, our capacity. It also, at the same time, is going to severely reduce our suffering, because once again, if there's no individual to build the story of suffering on, there's no one there to build the story, right? So without the story, we can't maintain the suffering. No suffering, greater capacity. It doesn't sound like a bad deal, right, guys? All right, let's keep going a little further. So if we can see how if I'm separate from a thing and I want that thing, right, that creates that feeling of push, of pull, of hold, of clinging, of grasping. And if I look at the core of it, it's resistance. Resistance to what? It's resistance to the way things are. It's resistance to this moment the way that it is. I want that. I don't want this. I want her. I don't want to be alone. I want to be rich. I'm tired of having to worry about. Check. Are we rolling? Yes, we are rolling. All right. So I got to get back to where I was and where we were. So the thing is, you know, the crazy thing is that about technology, it's always something. And I experienced some technical difficulties, kind of ran out of space, and realized that I needed an adapter that I did not have or could not locate anymore. So instantly the feeling of frustration came up. I mean, it was like almost overwhelming how much frustration. Being right in the middle of this task, right in the middle of completing this work, you know, this video, and having to completely slam on the brakes and completely shift gears and do something else. And in the meanwhile, also start the process rolling, start the wheels rolling of getting those ducks in line, as they say, to be able to continue and finish this process and actually just starting this whole new kind of chapter as the technology gets upped a little bit. You know, naturally, it's like anytime we create anything, we're going to come up against challenges. We're going to bump up against obstacles in the world because the world is going the way that it's going. And we have this inspiration to do something new. You have eons and billions of years of motion, you know, getting everything in line, getting everything exactly the way that it's going. And then we all of a sudden come along and want to change that. And you don't think we're going to run up against some obstacles? No, we're going to come up against some challenges for sure. And the thing is, this is great because it's an opportunity to deal with the resistance that we have towards change. We don't like change. We don't like things to be difficult. We have an idea. We want to execute it. We don't want anything to get in our way. We resist the things that get in our way. They're obstacles. We don't like them. We want to punish them. We want to destroy, right? But Again, this is an opportunity to come more and more into alignment with the way that things are so that we can simultaneously reduce or relieve our suffering, at the same time increasing our capacity, which gives us greater and greater ability to actually execute and do the thing that we're saying we want to do. A lot of times people say that they want to do things, right? A lot of people talk. They say, oh, I've got these goals. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. You talk to them a couple weeks later. What are you doing? You're not doing the things. You're not really doing the things that you said you wanted to do, or the things that would lead you to being able to do the things that you said you wanted to do. So a lot of people just talk, and be careful of this. Be careful. You got to watch your own self and make sure that you don't fall into this despicable habit of selling yourself short on what you actually are going to do just by talking about things that you'd like to do and then never really taking action. Listen, if you got something you want to do, then start taking some action. Does it bring up resistance? Is there something about the action taking that brings up some, I don't know if I want to do that. Yeah, I want to do that thing, but I don't want to do that other thing. I don't want to do that thing that challenges me. I don't want to get up there and have to talk in front of those people. I don't want to actually have to convince people to believe in my idea and to actually put some money behind it or something. I don't want to have to go up and ask that person for a date and, potentially embarrass myself. Yeah. Those things are uncomfortable. We resist feeling embarrassed. We resist being told no. A lot of us resist being told no so much that we don't even ask. I know I've fallen into that trap. Well, shit, if I don't ask, they can't tell me no. Fuck it, maybe I'll just do it anyway. Maybe I'll just do it without asking. That's what I figured out. That was a little trick, a little hack that I used when I was a kid. Oh, let's see, my parents are going to tell me no. Well, I don't want to encounter that resistance, so here's my way of dealing with that resistance. I just won't ask them. I'll circumnavigate the resistance. Oh, unfortunately, that didn't always go over so well for me. But, it did teach me some things. There's always a way. It just may not be the best way. Listen to your parents, kids. They're trying to help you out. Listen to them, but test them also. Test them. Don't just take them for their word. You got to test it for yourself. But in general, they're trying to help you out and trying to save you years and years of pain and torment and suffering. And that's what this is really all about. As we let go of resistance, our suffering drops away. That's what we got to remember. There's a whole pattern to this. This is what I'm trying to break down. It's the RSDS model. Resistance yields separation, which yields desire, which yields suffering. If we can find the pattern anywhere along the way, we can short circuit it. If we catch ourselves in desire, we can say, I'm desiring, I'm suffering. I'm feeling lust, I'm feeling disconnected. So what's going on? Well, where's the story? You can look for the story and make sure that that's not clouding your vision. Make sure that's not blinding you to what you're really feeling and dealing with. So look at the story, what it is. I want this. Okay, well, here's a separate me wanting this thing over here, and that's creating this feeling of separation. And it's a feeling of separation that I have created it within my own mind, and then I'm going to go about the business of trying to solve it. But if I can just see it right here in its creation, I'll be able to deal with it much more effectively. In fact, I'll be able to see through it so that it just drops away. Again, that is the power of awareness. Once we become aware of a thing, we don't have to fight against it anymore. Suddenly, our very awareness is enough to jolt us into the awakening that will separate us from our freedom, that keeps us separate from our freedom, that separates us from our happiness and peace of mind. We see through those illusions and they drop away. Awareness. Awareness is the key. So we catch ourselves in desire. We see through the story. Notice that that's not me. Just notice. That's a feeling. There's a feeling that's attached to a story. And I'm taking all of that to be me. I'm identifying as the one who needs that, as the one who is separate from that. But the thing is, everything is really just appearing in consciousness all at once right now. This whole notion of other that you're wanting, the whole feeling of separation that's keeping you separate from other, and most importantly, the you right there, you are separate from everything and everyone. That is the real crux of the issue there. It's that you have created this separate self, this individual, and it's held together and held in place by resistance. Now, when we can notice that, we can be free of it. We begin to just be aware. Notice how resistance is here. What did we used to do when we encountered resistance? Well, we resist it. We don't like it. We're using resistance already to cover up the feelings that we don't like to feel. So we're doing our best to not even feel the resistance in the first place because that's too close. We keep that at an arm's length, please, all those uncomfortable feelings. Just shun them. Keep them down in the basement, down in the cellar. Don't let anyone see. Don't let them come out. But you see, that's what's been keeping us trapped. We've been separating ourselves, cutting ourselves off from our own selves. We're keeping part of ourselves down in the cellar, locked up, never to be freed. And we're keeping a portion of ourselves up above the cellar, up here in the real world, hoping to one day find completion out there in the world, in circumstances. You starting to see how insane this is? This simply will not work. We can never fill ourselves up on this level enough to get to the point to where we're satisfied. We'll always be seeking, always be searching, always be feeling like we are not quite good enough, not enough yet. Something missing. Something is wrong. Yeah, this is good, but if only... Have you ever noticed that that is a pattern that we tend to get caught in? If things were like this, then I would feel like this. Then I would be okay. Then things would be wonderful. You know what? I'm going to just do this and only focus on this, blind to the fact that even if I do get that thing, it's not going to satisfy me. I'm going to be right back where I started. I'll have a new shiny object, a new medal, a new certificate that I earned, and I'll be right back in the same boat because I haven't solved the very core issue, which is that I'm trying to fix a separate self that does not exist. You don't exist. Not in the way that you think you do. Of course you exist. In reality, there is beingness, there is consciousness, there is awareness, hearing these words. There's understanding happening, right? So there must be a me doing it, right? No, that's the thing. It's consciousness doing it. Where we get caught up is when we think that it's a me doing it. Then we think that there's a me against the world. I'm separate. I have to do all these things to make all this happen, to keep myself safe, to give myself meaning, to make sure I'm living a life that's worthwhile. But all the while, the one that I'm thinking needs to do all these things isn't real. It's simply a figment. It's part of the illusion. And when I take that illusion to be the reality and I try to build up or protect or imbue meaning into that illusion, I get caught up. You see, this is very tricky. I'm trying to fix a problem that I created that is unfixable at the level at which it was created. What needs to happen? Again, let go. Resistance is what created it. Resistance is what created the thought, I am separate. Resistance is what even thinks that there is a separate will other than the will of the one that created everything, that is creating everything. Uh-oh, he started to get into something a little woo-woo there, didn't he? What do you mean, the will of the one? It sounds like he's talking about the G word. We don't want to go there, do we? Well, that's the thing. A lot of rationally minded people are in fear of going and looking at things of a spiritual nature because of what's been dubbed the pre-trans rational level of reality. And what it means basically is there's pre-rational, which a lot of these religious folk are stuck in. That's the dogmatic way of seeing things. Well, I just believe it because that's what's written in the Bible, or this is what's in the Quran, you must believe, or this is what my teacher told me, so I have to believe it. This was how I was raised, so I am going to believe this way. Well, what about this? Well, I don't want to think about all that. You question these people don't like to question their beliefs. They believe what they believe, right? And they fear that if they don't hold on to those beliefs, then there might be some punishment ahead for them. So a scientific, rationally minded person will look at that person and say, what an immature fool. He believes in God. He believes in all these superstitions. I'm not going to be like that. I am going to use science and rationality to base my beliefs on. But the problem is that's just more dogma. It's just a different type of dogma, and you're unwilling to see it and unable to see it because you're at that rational level, which is stuck in its own rationality, and you don't understand that there is a whole level of understanding that's beyond rational, that's beyond logic, that you can't use logic to put it in a little box because it actually doesn't exist in the mind. This is a little tricky. It's very tricky to convey. But basically the thing is, religious people are wrong. Religious people are definitely wrong because they are fools. They are unwilling to examine their beliefs, question them at a level of scientific rationality. However, the rational people are fools also because they are unwilling to let go of their rational beliefs to go beyond. What about when your direct experience disavows your scientific rationale? What happens when you encounter aliens? What happens when you encounter a being from another dimension? What happens to your science then? Then you're in a very precarious situation because you can't talk about any of your experiences with any rationally minded scientific people because they will all think you're crazy. You also can't talk about it with pre-rational religious folks because they will think you're possessed. You see? So you're actually operating at a higher level of understanding, and everyone around you thinks you are the devil or possessed or insane, highly suspect, dubious. In any case, we're not going to listen to you. But the whole fact of it is, I don't give a shit if you listen to me or not. You need to check it out and look for yourself. That's the whole point of it. It's called first-person science. So for you scientifically minded people, it is science. It's just science that no one else can prove for you. You have to actually have the gumption and the courage to do the experiment on yourself, for yourself, by yourself. Now, you don't necessarily have to be entirely alone. Certainly, other people are going to help. The people who have come before me, who have propagated these teachings, who have tried to show us the direction to look in, out, away from the mind, which is so captivating. It's so difficult to try to describe any of this because language doesn't really apply. Language is all in the mind, again. So what happens? Again, what happens to your language when you meet and encounter things that are of another dimension? But that's just to give you some perspective. We don't need to necessarily go there. That's for another video, perhaps. But the main point of it is we have created a false persona. We have taken ourselves to be something that we are not. The point of that whole tangent there was that there is a higher order of things that's going on that won't be recognizable unless we're able to let go of our beliefs and open our minds and be able to look directly in our own experience, be able to let go of our cultural conditioning that's trying so hard to keep us in line. We have to be willing to let go of our religious programming, which is also clutching at us, chaining us down, keeping our awarenesses locked into a specific way of seeing things. We don't realize how powerful these belief systems are at shrinking our awareness. Remember, awareness is what's going to free us. It's the only thing that has the possible power of freeing us. And the way to greater and greater awareness is by letting go of resistance. We'll start to see that that greater power is already running the show. And all we need to do is let go and watch it happen. So again, this has been Koharalan. I am going to sign off here, but remember to subscribe and go ahead and like this video and check out some of my other videos and keep involved in the conversation if you have some questions of specific topics that you'd like to examine concerning spirituality, consciousness, religion, science. Mainly what we're talking about here, though, is freedom. The things and practices that will lead to liberation so that we can actually become our true self. The self that we've always been. We can let go of this false idea of self that was causing us so much suffering and truly express and live our true nature. Truly express and live our genuine nature, which is freedom, which is total happiness and peace and courageousness and acceptance and wonder and love. And all we got to do is let it go, baby, let it go. But in the meantime, do your best to catch yourself aware of any inner resistance and simply allow it to be. In the past, we used to battle with it, but now we're creating space for it. We're simply going to be aware, there's resistance. And that's it. Be with it. Allow it to be. Let yourself feel whatever it is. And start to let yourself feel what's underneath of it, what it's trying to cover up. And as we let go of that resistance and it dissolves, naturally more and more of what's underneath is going to come up to the surface. All you need to do is be present. Just be there to allow it. And your awareness will take care of everything from here on out. Of this, I promise you. And I will be here along the way to keep you inspired and keep giving you little tips and to expand yourself and increase your direct experience of your own true self. So in the meantime, stay faithful, stay enlivened, stay enheartened, stay unwithheld, and allow the true divine expression of your own self to grow and blossom as it wants to. Until then, I'll see you on another video. Koharalan. Just signing out.